commitment with the community starts with our values and principles, of course. You know, it is principle 7. It has been always a focus for cooperatives. So it is part of our DNA. It is part of what we do and what we've always done. I think we also have to recognise that it is also very important to many of our competitors and many other businesses who see playing a positive role in the community as an important part of their corporate social responsibility. But of course, we don't do it for CSR. We do it because it's part of who we are. Our commitment as a co-op is to champion a better way of doing business for you and your community. So in other words, we want to make a positive difference to the communities that we serve, as well as benefiting our members. And so it has been absolutely at the centre of our cooperative strategy, our business strategy for as long as I've worked for the co-op, but certainly in particular for the last 5 years. We have put enormous investment and enormous effort in trying to innovate in this area with some really important programs that have involved quite a lot of financial investment, but more importantly, the backing of the whole organisation, who see support for the community as being really, really central to our business. So let me start off by saying that nothing about our strategy means that we are ignoring some of the major global issues that are important to all of us. And that's whether it be environmental concerns or fair trade. These are all and always have been and always will be important to us. But it is true to say that there has been a big focus on the immediate areas that we serve. We operate something like 2,500 shops in the UK, each of which serves a particular locality. And part of what we have been doing is developing some resources that help us to really create an affinity, create a connection with that community that is served by our shops. So if I give you just a couple of examples, the way in which we operate our financial support for the community through our community award scheme, we call it our local community fund, is that we divide the United Kingdom up into 1,500 different sectors. And in each of those sectors, we ask our members at a local level to identify 3 local causes. They may be charities, they may be cooperatives, they may be social enterprises. And it is those organisations that then benefit from a part of the members' reward that is received by our members. So the way that we do things in the co-op in the UK is for anybody who buys co-op branded products, they receive a discount of 5%, which they are able to benefit from, but then a further 1% goes to that community. And we target that at organisations that are very local. So if you think about what that means at any one time we are raising money for 4,500 local causes, local organisations. And I think that helps build one connection with the community. But there's another really important initiative which we are working very hard to develop right now, which is what we call our member pioneers. So member pioneers are people who we employ for a few hours a week to act as a connection between the co-op and all of the great things that are happening at a local community level. So their job is to act as a connector, a communicator, and a catalyst to help make things happen. And although I'm sure you can imagine, although the circumstances of the COVID-19 crisis is a terrible situation, in many respects, it is precisely this sort of situation where the community coming together to support one another, and for the different networks that exist at a local level, it's exactly this type of moment where this type of activity is really valuable. So our member pioneers and we are looking to have 1,000 of them employed across the UK, will play a really, really critical role, both in the immediate crisis situation, but actually beyond that. And so you can imagine this is quite a significant investment for us, but we see it both as a way of connecting the co-op to the local community, but also, from my perspective, rebuilding a base of activism. I think probably one of the things that has happened during my career within the co-op is there have been fewer and fewer active cooperative members who really wanted to make a difference. And I think that is probably because historically we viewed activism about attending meetings and that kind of thing. And clearly that has a value, but I think these days the real attraction is whether through the co-op I can make a difference through the campaigning positions that I take, but also the difference that I make at the local community. And our member pioneers play a really important part within that. And it's helped to inform our approach to the strategy. So I suppose to summarize, what I would say is that we have a number of really important programs that allow us to be relevant to a local community. And we're doing that partly because it's the right thing to do, partly because it fits with our values and principles. But let's also be clear as well, if your business model is to run small neighborhood shops, then actually it's really important that local community, the members in the area, feel a sense of connection and affinity to your shop. So there is some hard-headed commercial thinking as well as strong cooperative intent. So, I mean, if we start with the basic rationale for this, I'm sure it's the same in many European countries. The pattern of consumer behaviour is changing. The frequency with which people visit shops is increasing. People go more often, and they are looking to make regular small purchases, whether it be fresh products or top-up shopping, we call it, rather than just relying upon visiting the hypermarket sort of once a week. So the number of shopping missions people have is much greater. I think it is probably, there is an English word called serendipity. What serendipity means is you're in the right place at the right time and without necessarily planning to be there. And I think the truth is that in the 1990s, when our major competitors, people like Tesco and Sainsbury's and Asda, Walmart, were being very successful running hypermarkets, we were not able to compete. So the part of the market that we went to was small local shops. And guess what? Right now, at this part of the 21st century, small shops, along with online shopping and discounters, is where the market growth is. So I think, again, the first thing to say is we are in a good place, both in terms of meeting shoppers' needs, but also commercially. But I think it's then not enough to just be a local shop, because there are many, many small shops that operate in the United Kingdom and provide a local convenience service. So what then matters is how can you emphasize your difference? And I think this is where our programs and our activities become really important. It's where our membership becomes a real differentiator. So what I mentioned earlier on about the fact that members, when they shop with us, are also generating rewards that local community organisations will benefit from. That is something that is quite compelling at a local level, because if you know people who are involved in that local organisation, that local charity, then it does act as an incentive to want to shop with us. We also encourage our colleagues, our employees in our shops, to be very proactive at a local level. and to make great efforts to make connections with community organisations. And I think that is important too, because in some respects, we can have all of the corporate strategies in the world, but unless it is brought to life within our shops, unless our frontline colleagues actually understand and are able to be ambassadors for our cooperative difference, then it will not have the cut through. It will not have the impact. So I do think that there are. It is a really important part of what we do, that we encourage a strong connection with what matters most at a local community level, and we don't try and have one single corporate view of this is how you engage with communities. That doesn't mean that we don't have some centrally driven cooperative priorities. And so when we developed our community strategy, we were very clear to choose 3 priority areas which focus our community activity at a local level, but also give us a chance to aggregate it all so it becomes a more powerful national message. So our 3 priorities are around saving spaces, developing skills, and well-being, in particular mental health. And if you think about those themes, they are hugely important national themes, but they are also really, really relevant in every community at a local level, and can have different manifestations, different ways in which they are brought to life at a local level. So if you take, for example, the campaign around saving spaces, one of the things that has happened in the UK increasingly is many of the spaces that used to be managed by our local councils, by our local authorities, have had less investment. So it might be that in one particular area, it is the local park, the local municipal park that requires some support, or maybe the local library that is no longer funded in the way that it used to be. But in other locations, it may be different. It may be that actually it is the local pub that has closed down, and therefore organising some sort of community response to that, community buyout, is perhaps the right thing to do. So in other words, we have chosen themes that are applicable nationally, but can be brought to life in different ways at a local level. One of the most important things that we are doing is continuing to operate our business, because the provision of food, particularly at a local level, is absolutely critical. It is essential. And so everything that I'm about to say builds on that number one priority. And just to note as well, the Co-op Group is also the UK's largest provider of funeral services, which again is a really important business area to be in. Our response to the COVID crisis really falls into 4 areas. The first area is about supporting vulnerable customers. The second area is about finding volunteers to help with that. The third area is about securing funding, financial resource to help with that. And then the fourth area is about connecting people together. So if I just briefly describe the initiatives that we have under each of those four areas. Firstly, in terms of supporting vulnerable customers, one of the things that we discovered straight away was that for many of the people who are self-isolating, simple practical things like being able to pay for your shopping is a problem. And also being able to connect with people, knowing how to connect with people who can help you with that if you don't have a friend or a neighbour who can help that. So we have a co-op card that we have launched that allows for vulnerable people to request that card, which they then use to pay for shopping that they require. It is a way of It's a way of doing shopping without having to give over cash or a credit card or similar. And that, as a basic mechanic, that is something we've introduced. We have also sought to make connections with all of the local voluntary organisations that have become established, so that they know that the co-op is able to work with the local volunteer organisations who are on hand to help support people in a vulnerable position. There are two other areas in particular that I would highlight. We have a long-standing relationship with a charity in the UK called FareShare. FareShare is the UK's largest charity for food banks. And very early on, we learned that food banks were struggling to access enough products to meet the demand. So we've both provided a donation to FareShare of £1.5 million, but we have also, we were due to have an Easter television advertising campaign to promote kind of consumer products during Easter, and instead we changed our advertising campaign. So now it is a fundraising campaign for FareShare, which has been very effective in raising their profiles, so raising money. The other thing that we have been doing to support vulnerable people is we operate a number of schools, a number of, we call them academies. We have 25 state schools that are run by the co-op. And in the UK, in all state schools, children who come from families who have limited income are entitled to free school meals. So we have been very prominent in ensuring that when schools are closed down, the families who would previously have been entitled for free school meals are still able to access them. So we have been championing that within our own schools, but also with government nationally to make sure that that service continues. And we have a card that we provide to the families who would be entitled to free school meals in order that they can buy the equivalent of the meal from a local co-op. I mentioned the second area about volunteers, and this is where our member pioneers become really important, because I said, if you recall, that their job is to connect with initiatives that are happening at a local level, and that is very much what they are doing right now. So we have a lot of local neighbourhood organisations where our member pioneers are connecting them to vulnerable people who they know at a local level and with our shops. But also, as well as doing things very locally through our member pioneers, we have a platform, a digital platform that we have launched called Co-operate. And Co-operate is designed to be a kind of an aggregator where we bring together people who've got different contributions they can make in the local community. And what we have found is Co-operate is a very good way of matching people who are prepared to volunteer to help with also people who are in a vulnerable situation. So we are able to do things digitally as well as locally. The third area is about funding. And so just very briefly, I mentioned in some of the earlier questions that we support 4,500 local causes every year. We knew that each of those causes were facing some financial difficulties because of the crisis. So what we did was brought forward the funding of them. So in the last few weeks, we have shared and we have given an early distribution of £4.5 million to those groups to help them through these difficult times. We have also established support for, there is a national charity that has been launched within the UK, the National Emergency Fund, and we are supporting that. And we are doing that in part. I mentioned when I was talking about our membership proposition, where in the past, or well, currently, individual members are able to benefit from a 5% reward for when they buy co-op products, and 1% went to the community. During the crisis, we are asking the members if they want to donate their 5% to the COVID emergency. And the three sources of the three beneficiaries of that will either be the Fair Share charity, the food bank charity, or a funeral hardship fund. So in other words, people who are struggling to meet the cost of funerals. And then there will be a third element that will go to support local community activities as well. So they are sources of funding as well. And then the final thing, and maybe this comes to your sort of supplementary question, connecting people. So we are very keen to develop our Cooperate platform as being an online way in which we can connect people at a local level with what they're doing. That's clearly very important at a time when many people are self-isolating. It's a way of connecting volunteers, but it's also a way of connecting people who have a particular interest or knowledge who they want to share. So if you visit our Co-operative platform, you will see there are simple things like how-to guides in terms of how to run a online meeting, right the way through to how to support your children with homeschooling during the lockdown, and lots of other things. And I think using the Cooperate platform to complement our local presence on the ground is really helpful in the current crisis right now, but I think it will be a signal for how we will operate in the future. So I suppose to answer your question directly, I don't think we will ever be going back to how things were prior to the crisis. I think, indeed I hope, that a lot of the community spirit that has characterised the response up and down the United Kingdom will continue and will provide the opportunity for, if you like, almost a reimagination, a rebirth of what cooperation at a local level looks like. In some ways, it takes an emergency to encourage people to change. And it may well be that a combination of the COVID emergency and the community response, together perhaps with the emergency that existed prior to that, the climate emergency, and the growing grassroots response to that particular crisis, perhaps they will come together with a new spirit of social activism that will feed our movement for the 21st century. So I'm really hopeful that out of the most dreadful of circumstances will come perhaps a renaissance and a recognition amongst people that cooperation, mutuality, the commitment and support for one another, the original reasons why cooperatives were set up in the first place, will be more relevant than ever.